Well, let's get to June the 8th. This, June the 8th or June the 9th, I'm not sure, it's very specific. But what happened was that there was a ping between Gerry and Russell. Now, I don't know who was where, but they were 25 kilometers apart, and one came from Sagres, and the other ping was, I believe, in Praia da Luz. So who was where, I don't know. But they denied this. And the Express, who very often had the real news, but they had to delete a lot after they were accused and sued. So a lot of it was deleted. We have it all. We still have it. But this is what was in the news at that time. And it's very, very interesting to note that, okay. Oh, okay. I've just read that handsets can be tracked to an area of just a few yards. So they probably know exactly where it was. And now the hunt centers on the disused barn. I know on the other live I read it out, but I hope you bear with me, because I think this is such an interesting article that really places Gerry and Russell O'Brien in a place where ultimately it appears that the police found an Aztec towel, which a lot of us remember, but this was never put into the files. And apparently it had possibly Maddie's blood and fibers from the scenic. Now, it's not in the files, but it's, I think this is pretty close to what happened. So let me just read this to you, because I find it one of the most interesting. The hunt for Maddie McCann last night centered on a disused barn near Praia da Luz. I think it was in Sagres, 25 kilometers away, where police found a towel stained with what may turn out to be the little girl's blood. Now, fibers found on the towel allegedly match fibers from the hire car rented by Maddie's parents, Kate and Gerry. Portuguese detectives discussed the breakthrough when they met British police and a Crown Prosecution Service official last week at a police station in Leicester. Today, for the first time, the Sunday Express can shed light on the new avenue police are pursuing. It's very believable. It's a newspaper article, but it's very believable. Based on fresh information from mobile phone surveillance, police began a search of an area in the southeast of the resort. Now, this is where somebody needs to correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe it's southeast, 25 kilometers southeast in Sagres. Portuguese sources say forensic scientists used a substance called luminol to look for blood deposits and found 3 sites on the edges of the towel. They tested the blood deposits to see if there was a match with Madeleine's DNA. Now, although the samples were not good quality, the scientists were able to do what is called low copy analysis, which showed there was moderate support to suggest the blood deposits matched Madeleine's blood. The results were not conclusive and are not regarded as being strong enough to be presented as evidence in any court case. They also found a loaf and a carrier bag which produced the significant information, but close analysis of the towel revealed fibers which were not made of the towel material. The fiber fragments were microscopically examined against fibers found in the boot of the Renault Scenic hired by the McCanns 25 days after Maddie vanished. The Portuguese police sources say there was strong support that the fibers found on the towel matched fibers from the boot of the car. One possibly being considered by the Portuguese detectives was that the towel had at some point been in the boot of the Renault Scenic, which would explain how fibers had got on it. Now that is, to me, that is huge. I mean, we knew it at the time, and I don't think we could really hang on to it much because it wasn't in the files, and we really did try to keep on into the files. But I think now, looking back and seeing a timeline and seeing how all of this fits with this timeline, especially with some of the little discrepancies I'm just going to explain to you. This was July the 9th. What was really weird, and I don't think anybody really understood or could figure out why Gerry's blog was changed. He had a blog on July the 9th, which is this day. And if I get the right one, you can see it here. He changed the date from the 7th, from the 9th to the 11th. After we headed down to Sagres, which is the very most northwestern tip of Portugal, there is a very nice beach, and we had lunch with the family. Now, I think it initially did show as the 9th, but then he changed it to the 11th. Why? Well, I think something that really tells us something he didn't think we would actually be able to show is he said that's what happened on the 11th. This is what happened on the 11th. They were in Morocco. He needed to hide something from the 9th and pretend it was the 11th. Now, is that not a great big major flag? And here's the proof that they were in Morocco on the 11th. Not only that, and this is just a side kind of comment, is they're dressed in black. We always knew we always looked at that and thought, why would they be dressed in black? Now, if something had happened on the 9th and it was, I don't know whether, maybe they had some kind of memorial with her or something. But anyway, I can only show you what I see there. This is a map of the triangle. Now, Praia de Luz is further to the right, but on the 23rd of July, Gerry went to Washington. He was away for 3 days. During that time, Kate phoned the liaison officer, Ricardo, and was very upset and told him that she'd seen Maddie on a hill. This is what became known as the dream, which I've got videos on. And at that point, that was a turning point for the PJ. That apparently, there could have been something else involved, but that apparently was a major point, and that's when they brought in Mark Harrison with the dogs, with the cadaver dogs from England, because at that point, but Kate had basically claimed that Maddie was dead, that she'd passed. So they brought in the dogs. And that was, they didn't bring in the dogs till the 31st, I think, of July. But anyway, that's when they started sorting them. So Gerry goes away on the 23rd. He comes back on the 26th and goes straight past Praia de Luz when he got off the plane. Miss Prideluge went straight over to Villa de Bispo, which actually could have a ping from Sagres, or it was in that triangle area anyway, and was there for a couple of hours. And then between June and July, prior to this, there were several nights when they would go there for just an hour, like between 6 and 7, several nights. So that was kind of odd. But once Gerry got back, that was the 26th. And why wouldn't he come straight to Prideluge, pick up Kate if they were going there? You know, who knows? But on the 27th, there was a visit to Sagres, according to the phone pings. And if you can just bear with me again. Yeah, this is the 9th. The afternoon visit to Sagres, but only one activation. So that was the 9th. And this was the 11th, first ping back in Portugal. It's hard for me to see which one is the right one. I think this is, yeah, this is the 26th and the 27th. So on the 26th, this is where Gerry returns from the States and goes past Prideluge and over to Villa de Bispo and back to Boudens and then back to PDL. Now on the 7th, 27th, there's a trip to Sagres, early evening, leaves just after 5:30, would arrive just after 6 o'clock, and they left about 8 o'clock, giving him approximately just over 2 hours in Sagres before arriving back in Prideluge at 20:42, although it could have been any time from 7:20 that he arrived back in PDL, depending on the lack of activations. So what I discovered after checking is that the 27th, I believe, I need to double check on that. It's been a while since I visited it, but the 27th is the last day they visited that area, which tells me if her body was there, that's when they took the body. And I've said this for a couple of years. I haven't really promoted it because I have mentioned it, but I've not promoted it because I didn't have the rest of the timeline to kind of really go by. But now I'm seeing this timeline. Monday, he goes to Sagres to maybe sort what was going to happen. June the 9th, obviously something happened, and the police found details that something had happened, and they'd been there to Sagres. And then they went to visit several times afterwards, just for short periods of time. And then the 27th, 2 hours, immediately after the day after Gerry got back from Washington. But the thing is, when you take that in context with the fact that the dogs had been coming in, I think on the 31st they arrived. That's why Gerry went back, and it had to happen. It had to happen before the dogs arrived. Now, I don't necessarily believe that Gerry was driving the car at that point. When you look at the fact that on August the 2nd or 3rd, when John Corner arrived, he's always there, that's when they went to Huelva. And there was always a question about Huelva, and they have the acid lake or something like that. Now, I have read that this doesn't necessarily mean that it does dispose of a body there. I know we all thought that, but when I did look into it, it mentions, no, that's not a possibility, but who knows. Now, if I figure that maybe what happened, Gerry heard about the dogs, came back from Washington, immediately went over to make arrangements on the 26th, straight from the airport, because on the 27th they went back, maybe with Cameron, was his brother-in-law, was the one who drove the car, maybe with him, to go to into Spain, to Huelva, maybe. Well, we don't know. But the thing is, the one thing about Spain is that the police don't have jurisdiction over the pings, so they couldn't take any note of the pings, knowing if they whereabouts they went in Spain or anything, which is sad, but that may be part of the reason this was the chosen location. So if, and this is possibly what I believe may have happened, is maybe they went on the Thursday, on not sure if it's the Thursday, but the 27th, and maybe Cameron drove. I mean, I don't know for sure, but he was the driver, and Gerry apparently arrived back in Praia de Luz. Maybe he drove something, took Maddie somewhere, and Gerry was supposed to have gone to Huelva on the 1st, I believe, but they ended up going on the 2nd because the police came. I think it was the 1st. Forgive me, it's I'm going from memory here, obviously. So if that's the case, maybe that was their trip to Huelva on the 2nd with John Corner and the photographer. I think they had a cameraman as well. The weird thing was, again, as I'm thinking this may be a possibility, again, we know that the police were questioning it because the mileage on the car, and they disappeared out of wherever for 2 hours. So is it that somebody took her there first, and then on the 2nd they went with John Corner and spent the 2 hours dealing with whatever they were dealing with? Who knows what could have happened? We have no idea whatsoever what happened to her body. So I can't even go into that. But then they went on to do their thing, passing out posters in Huelva. And the thing was, it was John Cameron, Gerry's brother-in-law, who was the one that mentioned about the food leaking in the trunk, and that the blood came out of the meat and the smell, and therefore they had to leave the trunk open. This was in July, and July 27th maybe, and they had to leave the trunk open, and Gerry Gonzalo Amaral discussed about that, and he questioned the fact, because this is where we get into the Martin Brunt video that I started with. Now, we all saw, I think, at the time, that Martin Brunt video, but we could never use it because it didn't have, for me at the time anyway, it didn't have credibility to be able to use it because it wasn't in the files. But I think it was yesterday, I think, I was going over it with Gerry and found that there was the portion at the very beginning, which I'd never really listened to back then, that after they'd been made Arguidos, this was taken to the prosecutor, who put it into the hands of a judge to see whether or not they could be charged and whether they were going to have to bring them back from the UK. I mean, this was kind of major, but it's not in the files that I know of. But when you put it all together, Gonzalo tells us about the body fluids in the truck and how they went down onto the curb, and we only have, or I've only seen, there's 2 or 3 areas in the truck, in the Renault Scenic, that the dogs alerted to. But I believe one of those areas was there's a little cubby on the side of the Scenic, that it could be that it leaked through there. Now, oh, something happened. Now, we had an admin who spent half a day pouring water to see whether or not it would go down and how it would work. We never really came to any great conclusions, except she had a lot of water in her car, but that's excuse me. But that's where. So I'm going to play the Martin Brunt clip again, and just listen and see if you find how credible it is that this was a major, this is what they could have been charged with, which is a major thing. So that must have been so frustrating for the police to have had that information and not been able to.
Sky News understands that the files, which were delivered to prosecutors earlier today, include DNA samples belonging to Madeleine. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt is in Praia de Luz. Martin, the judge has the file now. The prosecution only received it today. It was with them for a short time. What's likely to happen now?
Well, the prosecutor appears to have already reached that very quick decision that, in his view, there is a case to answer, but it has to go now to the judge, and it will ultimately, as far as we understand, be for the judge to decide if there are to be charges. We've just been talking to a Portuguese criminal lawyer who said that such a decision by the judge would normally be taken within 10 days. There isn't really a fixed time limit, but that's the tradition, and most cases are decided in terms of excuse me, charges or no charges within that 10-day period. So within the next 10 days, the McCanns could find, if they are to be brought back here to be charged in connection with Madeleine's death. That's the accusation that was put to them during questioning, and it seems that it's on that basis that the prosecutor has already decided that a judge should make that decision.
Martin, there have been lots of different claims around the DNA evidence. What exactly do we know?
Well, we were reporting last night that the forensic scientists in the UK had found three instances of Madeleine's DNA. One in the apartment, but crucially 2 in the hire car that the family hired 25 days after she disappears. But the crucial part of the evidence appeared to be a complete match of Madeleine's DNA in the boot of the car. Now, that assertion has been moved forward today with reports in local media that yes, there has been a find of her DNA in the boot of the car, reportedly locally from body fluid. Now, we don't know exactly what body fluid, and I say this is only a report in the local media, but it begins to suggest that perhaps they're talking about body fluid from a decomposing body, and that might just explain why police here seem quite confident that Madeleine is now dead.
Now, am I the only one who really only listened to that last portion and didn't take in that it was major and taken to a judge after they'd come back, after they'd been made Arguidos and come back to the UK? It was given to the prosecutor, who passed it on to a judge to decide whether or not they could charge them at that point. There is an issue that we know that the police, that the forensic was a question. I do have the email that was sent to the PJ regarding I think it was sent to Ricardo Paiva, regarding that, yeah, it was a full match. And then they reneged on it and said, oh, I'm not sure if I've got the actual one on here. Oh, it was, we made a mistake. It's been contaminated. And Gonzalo Amaral has addressed that there should still be the information on that. But whether or not that was the reason that the prosecutor or the judge did not allow that information, I think that's pretty major. Before I